Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. Winning the Super Bowl is supposed to be the greatest moment of an athlete's life. When you think of everything that an athlete has to do, has to give up, and has to sacrifice to make it into the NFL, to then fully realize your dream and hoist the Vince Lombardi trophy is an incredible feeling. You've officially reached the pinnacle, and you're officially at the top of the mountain. No matter what happens from this point on, you will always be an NFL champion. You will always get to say that until the end of time. It's supposed to be a celebratory day that you never forget for all the right reasons. But for one athlete, it might have been the worst day of his life. This is Miami Dolphins kicker Garo Yepremian. Now, if you know Yepremian and recognize the name, you probably know him for one of the most infamous blunders in not just the history of the Super Bowl, but in the over a century-long history of the NFL. And we're definitely going to get to that. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about the second time that Yepremian won the Super Bowl, because he was the only Dolphin who was not able to celebrate the win. And the reason why he couldn't celebrate was absolutely tragic. This is the story behind the saddest win in the history of the Super Bowl. Before I talk about the moment in question and what made it all the more heartbreaking, we need some context to understand just who Garo Yepremian is, how good he was, and how he got to this point where he was playing on football's biggest stage. Yepremian was born in Cyprus, and after coming over to the United States, became the kicker of the Detroit Lions in 1966. However, after a few years, he found himself on the Miami Dolphins, being the team's starting kicker for Don Shula's first season, and for the team's first season in the NFL after the merger went through. And make no mistake about it, Garo Yepremian was an absolutely fantastic kicker. In fact, you could make the legitimate argument that throughout the first half of the 1970s, he was the best kicker in football. It's a tough call between him and Chiefs legend and eventual Hall of Famer Jan Stenerud, but that's just how good Yepremian was. In 1970, he led the NFL by hitting over 75.9% of his field goals, being one of just 3 kickers in football to hit at least 70% of their kicks that season, and not only setting the single-season franchise record in the brief history of the Miami Dolphins for field goal percentage, but being the first kicker in Dolphins history to hit at least 60% of their field goals in a single season, let alone 70%. He followed that up in 1971 by hitting 28 field goals, or an average of 2 per game, hitting on 70% of his kicks, and finishing second in the league in field goal percentage, only half a percentage point behind Tom Dempsey of the Philadelphia Eagles. As a side note, to learn more about Dempsey's time in Philly, click the card in the upper right corner. Additionally, his 28 field goals made ranked first in the AFC and second in the NFL, only behind Washington kicker Curt Knight. Not only was he named a first-team All-Pro for the first time ever, and not only did he kick the game-winning field goal in double overtime of the divisional round against the Kansas City Chiefs, but he scored the only points of the game for Miami at Super Bowl VI in their loss to the Dallas Cowboys. And in 1972, the good news for Yepremian was that he got his coveted Super Bowl ring, when he was the starting kicker on the undefeated 17-0 Dolphins team that won Super Bowl VII and picked up their first title in franchise history. The bad news was, well, you know, the play. Y'all know it. It might be the biggest blooper in NFL history. After his kick gets blocked, instead of just falling on the ball, Yepremian tries to throw it for some reason, and it gets picked up by Mike Bass, who takes it 49 yards to the house for a touchdown. After looking like they were going to dominate and record the first shutout in Super Bowl history, they let Washington back in it. And it was tough for Yepremian to celebrate that victory after such a play, saying, "I thought I gave the game away," and talking about how Don Shula chewed him out on the sideline after that play, and rightfully so. Yes, winning a Super Bowl is nice and all, but being able to win one when you're not a laughingstock and when you feel accomplished more than relieved is better. Fortunately for Yepremian, 1 year later, it was looking promising that he would get a chance to legitimately celebrate a title. In 1973, the Miami Dolphins were a fantastic team. Some even argue that the 1973 Dolphins were a better team than the 1972 Dolphins that went undefeated. Critics argue that the 72 Dolphins played a weak schedule, and their schedule was so weak that, believe it or not, they actually entered Super Bowl VII as underdogs, despite not having a single loss. But the 1973 Dolphins? No one had anything negative to say about them, as they went 12-2, had the 5th best offense in football, had a suffocating defense that finished first by allowing just 150 points all season, or 10.7 points per game, and had the best point differential in the AFC by a comfortable margin. And while there were many reasons why Miami was great in their quest to repeat as champions and become the first team ever to make it to 3 consecutive Super Bowls, one of the main reasons was the strong play of Garo Yepremian, who once again was one of the best kickers in football. He did not miss a single extra point, going 38 for 38 in that department. He hit on more than 50% of his kicks from the 40 to 49 yard range, and this was at a time where anything above 40 yards was expected to be a miss. It was a completely different era in terms of how automatic kickers were back then. And not only was he named a Pro Bowler, but he was named the first Team All-Pro, which was the first time in his career that he made it to the Pro Bowl and got to play in the league's All-Star game. And after a really strong postseason, where he went 7 for 7 on extra points and 4 for 4 on field goal attempts, in a 34-16 win over the Cincinnati Bengals in the divisional round, and a 27-10 win over the Oakland Raiders in the AFC Championship, the Dolphins found themselves in familiar territory. With that, we head down to Houston at Rice Stadium. It's January 13, 1974, and the AFC champion Miami Dolphins are taking on the NFC champion Minnesota Vikings at Super Bowl VIII. Obviously, the stakes of this game cannot be overstated, as the winner takes home the World Championship. But for Garo Yepremian in particular, this was a big deal. He didn't really get to enjoy the last Super Bowl win because of how horrific his blunder was. Even though hardcore NFL fans knew he was a good kicker, most of the country still remembered him as the guy that made the blooper at last year's Super Bowl. This was his chance for redemption, and this was his chance to actually get to celebrate a title properly. Unfortunately, he did not get his wish. The good news for Miami was that they dominated this game and won their second straight Super Bowl, becoming just the second team, alongside the 1966-67 Green Bay Packers, to win back-to-back Super Bowls. The Dolphins prevailed quite easily, winning it 24-7 in a game where Bob Greasy only had to throw 7 passes. Larry Zonka torched Minnesota, running for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns on 4.4 yards per carry, and winning the game's MVP award, becoming the first running back or fullback to ever receive this honor. They forced 2 turnovers while playing a very clean game themselves, only committing 1 penalty and never turning it over. It was a convincing win to show that Miami's undefeated season from the year before was not a fluke. And the even better news for Yepremian, at least on paper and to the general public, was that he played well. There were no bloopers, there were no errors, and there were no mistakes. In fact, he played a near flawless game. The Dolphins scored 3 touchdowns, and all 3 touchdowns were followed up by a successful extra point by Yepremian. And in the second quarter, with the Dolphins up 14-0 and facing 4th and 1 on Minnesota's 21-yard line, instead of going for it to try and keep the drive alive, Shula decided to send Yepremian and the field goal unit out there to try a 28-yard field goal and make it a 3-possession game. Remember that back then, the goalposts were up close, so while this would be a 38-yarder today, it was a 28-yarder back during the 1973 season. And he drilled the kick. Yepremian went 3 for 3 on extra points and 1 for 1 on field goals, and accounted for 10 of Miami's 24 points. It's tough to do much better than that, as he capitalized on every opportunity that he was given. So you would think that after this game, Yepremian would finally get a chance to celebrate properly, especially after all he went through on the field following Super Bowl VII. This should have felt like the monkey was being lifted off of his back, and this should have been a joyous and celebratory occasion. Instead, it turned out to be the worst day of his life. His wife was at the game, and Yepremian knew where she was sitting, and knew where to look while he was on the sidelines and whatnot. But as the game continued to move, even though there was just under 72,000 people at Rice Stadium, he noticed someone who was not there and had not returned to her seat, because his wife left in the middle of the Super Bowl, and the reason behind it is almost unspeakable. Garo was married to Maritza Yepremian, and the two were together all the way until Garo's death in 2015 at the age of 70. And during the 1973 season, the couple was trying to have a baby. This was an especially tumultuous time for Garo, as his mother underwent a pretty serious shock treatment where, as a result, she lost her memory. During that 1973 season, after a home game, Garo was informed that Maritza miscarried. The event happened that Sunday in the middle of the night, and Garo had no idea about the news until after the game. However, in wake of the tragedy, they still wanted to have a baby. The doctors said that the two should try and do this as soon as possible, and sure enough, 1 month after Maritza miscarried, she was pregnant again. Everything seemed to be going fine. Again, the Dolphins were winning, Yepremian was playing well, and Maritza was there throughout the first half. But when Yepremian came out of the locker room at halftime and looked up, he noticed that Maritza was no longer there. At this point, he started to get a bit concerned, but had no idea what exactly it was. As the game progressed in the second half, she was still not there. The concern levels grew, and immediately after the game ended, and immediately after Garo came off the field, he saw his brother, and his brother gave him the bad news. They had lost the baby. During the middle of the Super Bowl, Maritza was rushed to the hospital, and was informed that there was another miscarriage. At this point, Yepremian broke down in tears, and understandably so. He said, "My God, what have I done wrong? We lost the first one, and now we have lost a second child." Yepremian didn't get a chance to even celebrate the win. The Super Bowl was the furthest thing from his mind. In the locker room, as Commissioner Pete Rozelle was coming in to present the Dolphins with the Vince Lombardi Trophy, Yepremian panicked and told the commissioner what was going on, and that he had to leave immediately. Commissioner Rozelle set Yepremian up with a security person, who would drive Yepremian through the crowd into the hospital and would be able to bypass all the traffic and whatnot to get there as soon as possible. As Yepremian later said on the incident, the driver drove full speed through the crowd. I was nervous because I thought he was going to kill somebody on the way. When Rozelle presented the trophy to the Dolphins for the second straight year, Yepremian was not there to witness the moment. He was concerned that, for the second time, their attempt to bring a baby into the world was not meant to be. Even though there were victory parties taking place to celebrate the Dolphins, Yepremian never attended. He just wanted to be with his wife in his room and process everything. Fortunately, this story has somewhat of a happy ending, but unfortunately, he would never get to truly experience what it was like to be a champion. The good news was that this was a false alarm. Maritza was admitted to the hospital and was taken away in an ambulance because she was hemorrhaging, but the doctors were able to stop that. It had nothing to do with the baby. She was still carrying the baby. In fact, by the time Garo got to the hospital, his wife was no longer there, as his wife tried to make the 2-mile walk from the hospital to the stadium since that's where all the cabs were, although she was obviously not able to make it there in time, as the game was well over and the stadium had cleared out by that point. Fortunately for Yepremian, this was not another miscarriage. However, Yepremian never made it back to the Super Bowl. His last memory in the Super Bowl was leaving immediately after and not being able to celebrate with his teammates because he was rushing to the hospital to check on his wife and their baby. Yepremian played in the NFL all the way until 1981, and again, he was an exceptional kicker. He led the league in field goal percentage 2 more times, was named a member of the All-1970s first team, and is widely regarded as one of the greatest kickers, if not the greatest kicker of his era. He is undoubtedly the best kicker in Miami Dolphins history. But in his remaining 5 years with the Dolphins, and then 3 years after that with the Saints and Buccaneers, he never made it back to the Super Bowl and never won it. This forgotten tale of Garo Yepremian is truly tragic, especially after what happened at Super Bowl VII, where he was the GOAT. All he wanted to do at Super Bowl VIII was redeem himself and celebrate and truly get to feel like a champion. And he didn't get to do that because of an almost unspeakable tragedy that clearly triumphed whatever was taking place on the football field, since this was truly a life or death situation. For most people, winning the Super Bowl is the greatest day of their life, and understandably so. But unfortunately for Garo Yepremian, despite getting the Super Bowl champions bonus, and despite getting to call himself a world champion once again, the day of January 13th, 1974 might have been one of the worst days of his. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes, link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. If you want to see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.